What's up, everybody? Welcome to Value Town. I'm your host, ChanManV, and joining me as always is Trump. What's going on, Trump?
Holla.
Holla. And we got our guest, Reynad, he hasn't been on the show for, I don't know. When's the last time you were on the show, Andre? Maybe a couple months ago or
Probably
something
like
like
a
that?
month ago, yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. All right, cool. I know a lot of people are talking about Tides being on. Tides was gonna jump on here in case we couldn't get a hold of Andre here because he was taking a shower
Uh,
apparently. We didn't realize it. So
yeah,
we'll have Tides on.
punctuality.
Yeah, we'll have Tides on again sometime soon for sure. But today, guys, got lots of Naxxramas to talk about. Obviously, it came out just it came out 2 days ago, so lots to talk about, at least with the Arachnid Quarter, and that's pretty much what this is all going to be about. We're going to do kind of an old school Value Town where we go through the cards, and we've gone through a lot of the class cards kind of one by one over the last 10 weeks or so. But I figured we just kind of do a summary again, so there might be a little bit of re-talking about some cards. But now that we've built some decks with Naxxramas cards, it might change some of our opinions on it. So we'll do that, and we'll get a chance to do it with Reynad too. But let's start off by us just getting your initial reactions, or just your opinions on Naxxramas. Trump.
Initial reaction is positive. So the adventure was harder than I expected, which is good because that meant that it was the heroic part actually lived up to being challenging to some extent, and you actually had to build you had to use a bit of deck building experience and abusing the bosses to actually beat it, and you just couldn't go with the
Yeah.
standard thing most of the time. The cards themselves, some of them have made a big impact on the metagame already, and they will continue to do so. And it's already changing other decks without like directly nerfing them. So goal kind of successful.
Okay, Reynad, what's your opinion?
I'm pretty happy with it. The adventure mode is pretty fun, and it's kind of a cool way to introduce new cards.
Mm-hmm.
Like heroic bosses were definitely harder than I thought they would be. I agree with Trump on
They
that.
cheat so bad, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, but I like a lot of the cards that you get to play with, like the Rogue Challenge with Echoing Ooze is really fun. Yeah, I think it was pretty well done.
Mm-hmm. What classes did y'all use to beat my Exnon heroic?
Maxna, it's the spider one, right?
Yeah, the last one.
I
Well,
used like
actually, well,
his
actually,
name.
which ones did you use for the three of them? I guess I just might as well ask about all the bosses.
For the one that wants you to have a small hand size, I used Zoo, and
Yeah,
then
me too.
the other what was the other boss's thing? He
A new
makes
Verton.
creatures. Yeah, the one that makes creatures with the hero power. I did Miracle Rogue,
Oh
and
wow.
then
Okay.
Freeze Mage for my Exna.
Trump, how about
I
you?
did a similar path: freeze mage, and then zoo, and then freeze mage.
Oh, okay, great. I did Zuzu, and then I actually did Hunter at the end, believe it or not, and barely pulled it off. I didn't win with the kind of recycling of like Alex and that sort of thing. I must have gotten lucky because I ended up winning with Hunter. But lots of different ways. That's what the cool thing about it, right? Like you can figure out lots of different decks and just strategies to beating the boss. But those zero hero powers removing two guys, man, that's pretty sick. If it was an auto hero power in the beginning of each turn, oh my god, it'd be so much harder if there was just a little bit more AI to it.
Yeah,
Crazy. Yeah. So let's see. In terms of, I guess just the difficulty. I mean, is it about right for you guys, or do you think it should be a little bit harder? Because some people actually I've heard thought it was too easy.
personally, I'd like it to be harder. I always like it to be harder. I like to spend a bunch of time on bosses and stuff.
Yeah.
And the whole thing took probably like less than an hour between normal and heroic mode.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not even that it necessarily needs to be harder. I would just like it to be longer, or for there to be like more of it. I guess that's another way they could go.
Yeah. Trump.
Yeah, I guess my sentiments are shared. It's tough to make it much harder than it actually is, I'd say. So
Hmm.
I think it's at the right place. And yeah, more stuff is always cooler, but if they had like released the entire set in
Yeah.
one week, then that would be a lot of content also. So I kind of I support the way that they're doing it.
Yeah. A lot of people I think are. taking this initial release, of just the Arachnid Quarter as the entire expansion type of release. So they're thinking like, oh, this is so short. I finished it in an hour or two. But the thing is that there's four more, right? So you kind of have to look at it just more of as a piece type of thing, more so than the entire expansion. But okay, let's talk a little bit about. So you mentioned a little bit, Trump, about meta just being affected, and we'll get into, I guess, the kind of decks that we've been building as we discuss the cards. But generally speaking, have you seen any kind of crazy new things pop up, or just have you seen mostly just enhancements to things that are out there?
I think on this week particularly, since there are two class cards. I mean, there's a total of 6 cards, which isn't that
Mm-hmm.
many.
Yeah.
Two of them are the Poison Seeds, which is actually not very good at the moment because the set was mostly, I guess, aggro enhanced. Not necessarily aggro enhanced as much as it released cards which you don't really want to Poison Seeds. And
Yeah.
let's see, the Rogue one, it's in an interesting place. I actually started a free-to-play run deck for Rogue because that card was released. I think it's a solid spot. It makes a control Rogue possibly viable. The other cards, two out of four strong, 2 out of 4 extremely strong. You're seeing in many decks, Nerubian Egg and Haunted Creeper, and even the Nubar Weblord has some possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, I forgot what the card was.
Uh, it's with Maexna, I think. The
Oh,
spider.
right,
Yeah.
Megster. That card sucks.
That card just sucks outright.
But yeah, those two cost cards, I mean, even the third one, uh, shake things up quite a bit just
Mm-hmm.
because they are so anti AoE, so the aggro decks can get their time in the sun for now.
Yeah, Reynad, any cool things pop up, or maybe even something that you came up that's completely different?
I agree with Trump mostly. Most of the cards right now are like 2 mana harvest golems, which I've been honestly, that alone just changes how so many classes play out. I'm just trying stuff out right now.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of crazy out there stuff, I have some ideas, but I haven't gotten a chance to play with it or stream it yet. Mostly, I've been trying to go for rank one a lot.
Okay.
So I'm like try harding with like very few decks. But yeah, it's right now the pattern I'm noticing is well, first it was a lot of zoo, then it was a
Yeah.
lot of druid, and personally I really like shaman right now. I don't know. I can't really
Yeah,
say
me too.
what the best deck is. After wing four, I know it's zoo. After wing one, you can it's pretty balanced honestly. All the classes are pretty good. Miracle Rogue is probably still a little too good, but you still see a good variety of stuff.
Okay. Any of these cards actually enhance Miracle?
Nope.
I don't think so,
They
right?
actually made them worse. They made
Yeah, right.
Miracle
They're still too
by
good. Yeah.
putting good cards for the 1/4 spider
Yeah.
and
Right.
playing that on purpose. And it so the deck is like 28 playables and 2 spiders, and it's still winning more than anything else because people are playing a variety of like, mm, just people are trying stuff out, right? So not everyone's deck is very polished. So Miracle Rogue is just cleaning up on all of these like unpolished decks.
Yeah. Oh, looks like we lost Trump here. Hopefully he'll be back. We'll see. Um, but yeah, it's funny about the 1/4, right? The Web Lord. It kind of started dawning on me, and we'll probably talk a little bit about it. That I was like, oh yes, it could be good against, it could be good against druids and maybe even rogues, right? With miracles. But then I realized, wait, the combo keyword and those option keywords don't have battle cries, so it's like, oh man, didn't quite work out that way.
Yeah, the most interesting thing about it is that it's a 2 mana 1/4, which is like those are fantastic
Yeah,
stats.
true.
Um, but you really want to buff it with like battle cries, which it kind of punishes. It'd probably be better as just like a 1/4 vanilla creature.
Hmm.
The only 1/4s in the game that have ever existed are Armorsmith and Lorewalker's Show before they nerfed it. Um,
Oh yeah.
so yeah, it's like it's interesting. I don't know. It's like it's a good size, good stats, but the ability is pretty useless in my opinion.
Yeah, the ability I thought it had potential, but then I realized that yeah, just it's not quite as effective as possible. But it works well. It works well in at least some classes like Shaman. Like you were mentioning Shaman too. I think Shaman's a lot better now too with these cards. Yeah, an additional Harvest Column by itself I think makes Shaman really really good. So
Hmm.
good stuff. And we're trying to get Trump back on here, guys. I'm not sure what happened. Looks like Skype must have just cut out on him. Who knows what happens there? But any other thoughts on Naxxramas in the meantime?
No, it's fun to play with this stuff right now. I'm excited to experiment more once all the cards are out, because then there's more synergies to work with.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it started off as just zoo cleaning up. Like as soon as I was done with the adventure, I went into ranked mode. And
Yeah.
I climbed up to rank 2, and then
Yeah.
I started playing nothing but mirror matches in Ancient of War, and then I was not winning so much anymore. We'll see
That's
if the
nice.
pattern continues.
Exactly. Crazy. Hey, Jump.
Hey.
Lost you there for a sec. But we're gonna wait. We're just killing time here until you got back. But why don't we just jump into cards because we got a lot of cards to discuss, and we might as well just talk some more about decks while we do that. So we're gonna hop into our kind of old segment format, where we show cards, and we're gonna start from the bottom. And we're gonna kind of ascend, kind of mana wise. So the class cards will just be dispersed throughout. But let's start off with Avenge, guys. So the Paladin card. Any new thoughts on this card, Trump?
Same as always. I think it was commonly referred to as the worst card in class cards, but I disagree. I think it has its possibilities in an aggro paladin deck, and will actually be a staple in that one.
Yeah.
Staple meaning that it'll be run in all the aggro paladin cards decks.
Reynad?
Yeah, I think it's at first I was really upset because Paladin is like one of my favorite classes. I wanted a nice 2 drop so I can put it into my mid range and control Paladin decks. And then they printed this secret that's only really good in the aggro one. But to be fair, it's like really good in the aggro one. I think it's definitely a lot better than like the Mage and the Shaman card in Naxxramas. It's definitely a strong card because you can't. It's like a death rattle that you can't really interact with because they have the secret down and it's not like you can silence it off. You have to kill their creature, and then that'll probably make your second creature unkillable that turn,
Yeah.
especially if you play it early. So I think it's pretty interesting. It's like really powerful if you draw it early because it's just it makes killing creatures really ineffective.
It could be interesting with even another Nax card, which is going to be Mad Scientist. Where that throws a secret on. I wonder if it happens. Like, does the Mad Scientist hit the board before the secret hits? Because or no, the secret no, the secret has to actually trigger before it actually upgrades that. But Mad Scientist could help quite a bit. Maybe make for more Paladin secret based decks. That'd be kind of cool. Okay, that's Avenge. Let's go to the next one. Let's see. Next one is Undertaker.
Yeah, that card is insane. At first, I thought it probably wouldn't fit into Zoo. Like Zoo really wants a 2 health 1 drop that can deal at least 2 damage.
Yeah.
So at first, I thought it would be unplayable because you don't want to play cards like Loot Hoarder in your Zoo deck, in order to enable it. But then they printed just a pile of phenomenal Death Rattle cards that you're going to play in Zoo anyway.
Yeah.
So Undertaker is like one of the major reasons I think the deck will be unstoppable after the fourth wing. Yeah, because oh man, it's really really powerful in that deck. Like if you even buff it once, it's a 1 mana 2/3, which is already like better than Flame Imp. So I think it's
Okay.
fantastic.
Well, that's
In Zoo at
interesting.
least.
Trump, what do you think?
Yeah, the card is extremely, extremely strong, and cards like this, along with the other 2 cards released this week, are going to make Zoo very strong. Though I wouldn't call it unstoppable.
Okay. Well, let's see. Next one up is we got Web Spinner.
Nah, that card's really strong. I'm excited to play it in mid-range Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually they'll print enough good cards for Hunter that I don't have to play River Crocolisk anymore. That'll be a sad day, but yeah,
Be a
it's
sad day. Yeah.
Spinner's cool. I think it's clearly a powerful card. I think it's probably like the third best card out of all the Naxxramas class cards. It's solid. It looks like it's fun to play with too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm surprised this isn't one. I'm surprised they didn't start with this as being the classes. Like they started with Druid and Rogue, but this is the Spider. This should have totally been in the Arachnid Quarter, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised also.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised at Reynad's bullishness about this card. Like, I happen to be one of the people who also thinks it's pretty good, but most of the there's a lot of comments that this card kind of sucks, actually, even in the case of a beast-focused Hunter deck, but I disagree, and Reynad clearly does too. I think it's just a nice add-in. It's like almost an automatic addition to anything with beast energy.
Yep.
Yep. Let's see. Next up, we got Zombie Chow.
Yeah, holy crap! I did not like. I was
What is
all Zoo needed is 1/1 drop. I was so excited and so excited when I saw enough Death Rattle guys for Undertaker, and then I saw Zombie Chow, and my mind was like blown. You get you get a 1 mana 3/4 and a 1 mana 2/3. Like holy crap, Zombie Chow is great in Zoo. That was really really good. The Death Rattle is probably better than even if it was a vanilla 2/3 because it buffs Undertaker sometimes, and their life total is completely irrelevant.
It's
Like
because insane. If for turn one, yeah, that's like 2/3 with the Undertaker. That's pretty awesome too.
yeah, I think eventually. I mean, I might be wrong about this, but I think eventually we'll see a nerf to Warlock hero power, or at least we should, because the more cards that get released, the stronger, like the higher card quality the average card in your deck is.
Hmm.
So the Warlock hero power is the only one that scales upwards with more cards being released, whereas all the other hero powers get worse.
Yeah.
Because when there's more cards, people play more efficient cards, and the games speed up. And it always happens in every Magic format. The more cards there are, the more the format speeds up, and the more it speeds up, the less time you have to do things like Druid hero power. And nothing dies in Naxxramas to hero powers anymore anyway. So I think that like yeah, Zombie Chow, man, I don't know. Warlock's gonna be pretty gross. There might be so much Warlock at first that people just play the straight counter deck, and that deck might be able to beat it. But eventually it'll balance out, and Zoo will just be so strong that even if it's not winning more than every other deck, it's warping the metagame around it because of cards like Zombie Chow. Like that card is really good.
Yeah, it seems like I mean, it seems like it is going to be pretty insane. Even counter decks are going to be possibly harder to make, given that the resilience of some like a 2/3 is much more resilient than 3/2, obviously, right? So it's going to be even harder. Trump, what do you think?
Yeah, this card is incredible. As someone who worries more about board control than life totals, then like it's just incredible. 1 mana, 2/3. You play it early on, and the death rattle doesn't even matter.
Yep. The death rattle is just
Not much to
wins.
say other than the stats are really good.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a great top deck for what it's worth, though. But perhaps it's it's still good enough.
Yeah. Okay. Next up is the Echoing Ooze, which I think has the coolest animation, at least
And
in Naxxramas, maybe even in the game. I think the ooze looks really really cool and how it ends up popping or like copying itself and then popping and that sort of thing. What do you think of this card, Trump? I'll let you lead off with this one.
It was one of the coolest cards in the set, I'd say. A lot of people I've talked to have said this is the card they look forward to the most. By itself, it's even efficient, even if you don't do anything with it. Since you play a 2 mana, you get 2/1/2s. That's fair. But what's even better is you add common buff cards such as Mark of the Wild on it, and you get 2 Tazdingos for 4 mana, and that is really valuable. And it's not even a bad combo because the Echoing Ooze by itself is already good. This is one of those cards which actually kind of slows down the meta a bit, which I like because it makes it more control oriented, since there's a higher amount of health than attack, and you kind of see that theme across all of Naxxramas. And I like the direction that heads. So this card is great. It pushes it more towards a late game oriented. It has cool interactions, and it's a good card, and it's a cool card. So hooray!
Reynad?
yeah, I completely agree with all of that. It's one of the most fun cards to play with. Like I mentioned, the Rogue Quarter where you get to play with it is really cool. Um, Again, I'm gonna say it with pretty much most of the cards in the set, but oh my God, this card is good in Zoo, and yeah, it's fantastic. I think it's like they nerfed Novice Engineer because it was too good as a
Yeah.
2 mana 1/2 that drew you a card, and Echoing Ooze, like worst case scenario, it's a 2 mana 1/2 that draws you a 1/2 Wisp, which is pretty good in aggressive decks and in controlling decks. I think it's pretty awesome, man. It's one of the cards that's gonna be the reason we see way more stuff like Defender of Argus. It's so much easier to like play a creature and have it stick for a turn now instead of just getting killed immediately.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm definitely excited to play with it.
Okay. Moving on, we got another card that's that's about keeping minions on the board, and we got the Haunted Creeper, which is one of the cards that was released. Initial thoughts on this, Reina?
It's really strong. The first time I saw it spoiled, it was a 2/1, which would be. At first, I thought it was better as a 1/2 because health is generally better than attack. But in the case of Haunted Creeper, it would be better as a 2/1 because then they can't just ignore it. Because at least in high rank constructed, the best strategy against Haunted Creeper that I've seen so far is ignoring it. Like you just don't
Yeah.
try to kill it. You just go for face, kill the other stuff, let it peck away for one, and then make them suicide it into something. But it's still a really powerful card. This is like one of the cards that I think makes Shaman a lot stronger than it used to be. And yeah, it's fantastic. I'm excited to play with it more. I've been putting it into most of my decks so far. It's really strong. It's the 2 mana Harvest Golem.
Yeah. Yeah. Trump?
Yeah, some of the classes have lacked a good 2-drop. I'm going to note Paladin Control as an example, and I think Conduit Trooper is actually a really good card in that deck. It's a good deck. It's a good card in most control-oriented decks. That includes Zoo, which I consider kind of a board control deck. It doesn't do a lot of damage, and yes, the main answer is to not kill it, but it gets in there for one on one of their minions, and then it creates more guys. And when you do the calculations, like you can argue it's a 3/4 for 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's generous, but kind of close enough. I think of it more as like a 2/4, or maybe even a 2/3 for 2. It's somewhere in that range, which makes it good because it's like a 2/3 with upside. So you'll see that in a lot of control decks.
Yeah. There's some downside too to ignoring it, because I try to ignore it too, but then you give your opponent the ability to set up plays, like maybe Knife Juggler, right? Like throwing down Knife Juggler and then killing it himself. So it's kind of cool. I was hoping that the spiders that were summoned would be beasts, which would make Hunter really crazy cool. But unfortunately, the spectral spiders are not beasts, so not as much synergy as I was hoping with Hunter.
Yeah, the
Oh,
Knife Juggler interaction is actually bugged right now too.
oh,
You
is it?
can,
Oh, because
yeah,
it
like,
overkills, right? It overkills stuff.
yeah,
That's not
that's like
intended, right? That can't be
I don't
intended.
think so.
Yeah, I hope it's not intended. It doesn't make sense in some scenarios. Okay, next up we got Mad Scientist. All right, what you think about this, Reynad?
That card's great. Yeah, 2 mana, 2/2, a ton of upside. It's really powerful. You can even get like the fact that he gets really expensive secrets out of Mage is kind of interesting because
Yeah,
it's like more copies of Ice Block if you want.
yeah,
I mean, it's a really powerful card. It's much better than it looks at first. It's gonna be strong in I mean all the classes with secrets it's playable in. Hunter's probably the deck where it's at its worst, I'd say, but I like it a lot in Paladin and Mage, I think, and it's still probably fine in Hunter. Yeah, I look forward to playing with it because it's a really interesting card. You can do some cool things with 4 Ice Block.
yeah. I mean, a lot of times with the mage or the freeze mage, you're just trying to figure out how to fit that 3 mana in, right? A lot of times, just to get the ice block or even the ice barrier sometimes. So yeah, this fixes a lot of it. Trump, what do you think?
Okay, well, first of all, I love that they called a card Mad Scientist, and I have to say this much. Um, I am Mad Scientist. Chaos and invade. Ah. Anyways, that is really cool, and like you thought Loot Hoarder was good. You see it in some decks. 2 mana, 2/1 Death Roll, draw a card. Mad Scientist, even better, situationally, because you have a 2 mana, 2/2, and you get to develop a 1 or 2 or 3 mana secret with it, and
Hmm. Yeah.
this is kind of it has synergy with like a different type of deck, so it's really cool.
All right. Next up, Weblord, which is another one of the cards that's released right now. What you guys think of this, Trump?
Which one?
The Weblord, the
Oh, the Web Lord.
Nurubar Weblord.
Yeah, it's one of those cards which is going to be good against. It's okay. 2 mana, 1/4 by itself is not that great. It's okay. However, that ability it really aims at certain decks. I think Zoo is one of the targets also. So if you see a lot of a certain battle cry, you might start seeing this more.
Okay, Reina.
I think this particular one is one of the few like really weak cards in the set. This and the 2/6 Spite in this wing are the two cards I don't really consider playable. The decks that have like the most battle cries that you're trying to interact with are decks like Zoo, but they're also the decks that play a 2 power creature on turn one and then just kill it in one hit. So I think that it's I don't really know why the Rogues are playing it. I think it's pretty underwhelming, but There could be a metagame where it becomes really good. I don't know. Usually though, I don't think it's worth using a card to make a 1/4. That's just not going to really have an impact on the game, in my opinion. But it's yeah, it's interesting. Like the stats aren't bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those cards which you're aiming at a specific deck. Like, if this were out when Miracle was in full force, it gets rid of their Earthen Ring Farseer and their Drake, and I think it's got potential in that kind of set as well. It's one of those things where you have to see how much Battle Cry is out there and whether or not your deck has Battle Cry, and you might not want to consider playing it.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay, let's see. Next up, we got Nerubian Egg. Okay, well, obviously this is a card that I think a lot of people have been using. But Trump, what do you think of it now that you've used it?
Nerubian Egg is insane.
It
I'm
is
not sure how
insane.
this got past QA. Like, we've been, well, not just game testing in general.
Design,
It would
yeah.
seem to me that like everyone knew this card was going to be good, pretty
Hmm.
much, and it turns out that it is really good. Uh, Even if you want to try to silence it, they get a 0/2, you get like a 2/1 and an owl, and it's like, oh, that's not even that good. This card has really vaulted Zoo up in power, as well as any other deck which can buff an egg. You get a 2 mana 4/4, and not only that, it's kind of debatably a 2 mana 4/6 because if you're using a buff to use the egg, then you can actually utilize the egg itself to do something, like maybe it kills a guy, and then you get a 4/4. So that's even better. So this card is really, really good, and I think it might be played even if you only summon a 3/3 Nerubian.
Yeah, I think so too. Reynad.
Yeah, I think it's pretty nuts. Might get slightly nerfed in the future. We'll see. It's really powerful. I'm excited for it in decks like Shaman mostly. In decks like Zoo, it's good. Everyone knew it would be good in decks like Zoo, but it kind of does have a drawback in that it slows the game down a lot. So if your opponent has a slower draw, they still have time to play all their cards because you're playing cards like Egg and Creeper instead of like Scarlet Crusader and
Yeah.
more aggressive cards. So your opponent generally has like one more turn to play stuff now. But it's worth giving them that turn to play cards as high power level as Nubian Egg because it's just a lot of stats for 2 mana and a card. More in decks and see all the cool things I can do with it.
Yeah.
Crazed Alchemist and stuff once the Priest card's released. Like, it's good.
Of the opponent plays a consecration or the opponent plays a
Yeah.
flame strike. That's the best way to pop the card. I'd like to. Oh man, your stream is down.
Oh, is it? Shoot.
We're
Oh,
back.
is it okay now? Okay, yeah. It had a few drop frames there, but
Okay, so it's really good as just an anti AoE card when you have a lot of guys out.
yeah.
And I would like to say that I think popping it with one of your own damage cards or one of your cards such as Crazed Alchemist is actually not ideal
Hmm.
because it means you've used one of your cards which kind of has utility onto another card. And actually, there's been some popularity to some extent of using Crazed Alchemist with this card, and I'm not that big a fan of that because then you have to play Crazed Alchemist, whereas you can. I think there are better classes to utilize the card than requiring Crazed Alchemist.
Yeah. My favorite is Void Terror so far. Making a 3/5 and a 4/4. That's actually pretty fun. Okay, let's see. Next up is Reincarnate. Okay, and Reincarnate is which class? I forget which class. Is it?
Um, it's pretty specific.
Hmm.
You have to have a really good death rattle, so it's tough to say. I think it has possibility, and given that the game is leaning more towards a later game control, I don't think it would be out of the question to have some sort of later game Earth Elemental Ancestral Spirit reincarnate or some Cairn
Yeah,
reincarnations.
Karen.
I don't think this card is actually that bad, unlike the opening salvo fired by Reynad. It is pretty specific, I will say. So in that case, you'd have to build a deck that had cards which Shaman currently doesn't run in order to use the reincarnate, but I do think it has its possibilities.
Okay, Reina.
It's one of the weaker cards, but it's not unplayable. The thing with if you're gonna play it, it's probably gonna be a one of in a like in place of Wind Fury in a Shaman deck to go with Leroy. But I think that Shaman is the hardest deck in the game to find room for cards because there's so many things that you just have to play, especially with the advent of cards like Nerubian Egg and Haunted Creeper. It's really hard to find room in that deck right now. So personally, I don't think we'll ever see it being played, but it's not because it's like completely unplayable. I mean, it's pretty bad, but it's mostly because they're just the other cards are just better, I think. And yeah, not horrible, but the card's just not quite
I
worth
mean,
it. There aren't any huge death rattles you like want to play in the first place in Shaman, right? Like reincarnating a Harvest Golem or a Haunted Creeper, like Nerubian Egg is okay, but spending like two cards to make a 4/4.
Yeah.
But with Leroy's where I see it being okay. Maybe you can heal a Fire Elemental.
I kind of liken it a bit more to, uh, let's say, Priest, as an example. You'll often see a Priest use Sylvanas and Shadow or Death. And yes, Shadow
Hmm.
or Death has some utility. You can kill the other guys, and that's why it's not bad to run both of them. But Sylvanas itself isn't bad either. So you can see Sylvanas being run in a Shaman deck. You play the Reincarnate, maybe it's a one of, and then sometimes you reincarnate Sylvanas. It's just like
Yep.
Priest Shadow were deathing their own Sylvanas, except you also keep your Sylvanas. So that is pretty good. I think this card is going to see some experimentation. I think jury's out on whether or not it's good or bad.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, Sylvanas, that would be a really, really good application of it. Unstable Ghoul is next. And which one is this? Time Death Row, deal one damage to all minions. Oh, okay. Reynad, why don't you start with this one?
The card's pretty sweet. It's gonna slow the game down a bit, which again, like Trump, I like that. More turns in games are a good thing. I think, yeah, I think Unstable Ghoul. It's one of the things that might slow Zoo down just enough to give the other decks a reasonable fighting chance. The issue is it doesn't really kill anything. It kills like the second half of a Haunted Creeper,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely a high power level card. Like, yeah, I think it's well, that'll definitely see play.
It's a mini abomination.
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah, excellent card in a deck that isn't Zoo, which is generally aimed against Zoo. Uh, like a 2 mana 2/3 is good. This one does a minimum of, well, not a minimum, but usually will deal at least 2 damage. So you can think of it as a 2/3 for two, but
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot of upside. And the main upside is you play it in a deck without very many minions, or at least in the early game, and then you finish them off with something else.
Anything except Shaman and Zoo, I think you can play it in. Maybe even in Paladin you could play it. Even if it kills a lot of your own guys, it's like a decent two drop, and you're not necessarily you can trade off your one ones first.
Yeah,
I think it's
sure.
strong. You can play it in just about anything.
Yeah, agreed. And speaking more about like Acolyte of Pain, this guy's like Acolyte of Pain's best friend.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, next, Dancing Swords.